What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be going over my Season 7 BOULDERCANE bear build here in Mobalytics. Now, before we get started, I did want to go ahead and mention that if you have already been playing around with this build, go ahead and check back to the build page because I have made several tweaks to it. One of them being I did reduce the amount of Paragon points on the initial Paragon board setup, so that way you guys had a better idea as to how I was pathing my Paragon board initially. And then I also did swap out some witch powers because there were just some witch powers that I thought were more fun than others. On top of that, I am building out all of my builds in hardcore, more specifically hardcore solo self-found, so that way casual players have a better idea as to what they can expect with these builds. I did want to go ahead and mention that I did manage to clear a tier 100 pit with this build with very manageable gear, as well as capping myself at level 200 Paragon. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's go ahead and go over the build. So for our primary skill, we're going to be using Boulder as well as Hurricane because this is a BOULDERCANE build. Then we're slotting in Petrify as our ultimate skill. Then we're picking up Claw just to help us shift back and forth between Werebear and Werewolf and build up our buffs. Then we're also going to be using Earth and Bulwark just to break out of those crowd control effects whenever we find ourselves CC'd. And then we're going to be using Bloodhound to maintain those defensive buffs that we have, as well as give us a little bit more attack speed while this skill is active. Moving on to our Spirit Boons, we're going to be running Weariness on the Deer for the damage reduction. On the Eagle, we're going to be picking up Iron Feather as well as Avian Wrath just to increase the overall damage of our overpower crits, as well as make us a little bit more tanky. Then on the Wolf, we're going to be using Energize just to help with our resource management. And then last but not least, we're going to be using Obsidian Slam on the Snake, which gives us a guaranteed overpower on every 6th Earth skill cast. Now moving on to the aspects uniques of the build, and there is a mythic version of this build if you do have a Shot of False Death or a Ring of Starless Skies. But for the base setup, we're going to be using Vasili's Prayer on the helmet, which turns our Boulder skill into a Werebear skill. Then we're going to be slotting in Insatiable Fury on the chest piece, which again complements our Vasili's Prayer by adding more ranks to Werebear skills, as well as giving us some overpower and a lot of nice survivability with the other affixes. Then on the gloves, we're going to be using the Metamorphic Stone aspect, which gives our Boulder the core skill tag. So then our Boulder has both the Wrath skill and core skill tag, and that's a big reason why you'll see some things in this build that affect Wrath skills. For our pants, we're using the Exploiters aspect because it gives us a nice amount of damage towards enemies that are unstoppable. And when you're pushing into high tier pits, enemies become unstoppable pretty fast, so you're going to get a lot of benefit out of having this specific aspect slotted in on your character. Then on the boots, you're going to be running the Storm Shifters aspect, and again, because we're turning our Boulder into a Werebear skill, it will automatically get that Shapeshift tag, so we're going to get the +5 ranks to those skills while we have Hurricane up, and we're always going to have Hurricane up because, again, it's a BOULDERCANE bear build, and if we didn't have Hurricane up 100% of the time, this build would be absolutely terrible. For the weapon, we're going to be using the aspect of Retaliation, which again just gives us more damage when we have our Fortify up. On the amulet, it's obviously going to be the Dolmen Stone amulet because without that, this build would not function at all. For our first ring, we're going to be running the aspect of Changeling's Debt, which gives us more damage with our Werebear skills towards enemies that are poisoned. And then on our second ring, we're going to be running the Hunter Zenith ring, which has a really powerful effect of giving us a guaranteed overpower crit with our core skills when we do have this specific buff active. And it's going to be active quite often because we'll be swapping back and forth between Werebear and Werewolf. Now, I do want to go ahead and mention that this is a bit of a flex spot if you are having resource management issues as you're starting to get this build online. And I did go ahead and write down here in this text box a bit of information to help maybe guide you guys in the direction that you need to go if you are experiencing resource management issues until you find those better pieces of gear. Now moving on to the affixes of this build. So for the Vasili's Prayer, we do want to maximize our willpower as much as possible. However, if you are having issues getting your armor capped in Torment 4, I always recommend running a GA to armor on this helmet. Then on to our Insatiable Fury, I recommend getting a GA to Earthsign Strength bonus and then cranking that up as much as possible. For our gloves, we're running Max Life, Lucky Hit chance to make enemies vulnerable, ranks to core skills, and then an offensive Earth critical strike chance tempering, as well as some petrified duration. For the pants, I like to go Max Life Armor, Resist to all elements, a total armor tempering, and a hurricane duration tempering. On the boots, we're gunning Max Life, Resistance to all elements, ranks to Boulder, and we're pumping that up as much as possible. And for the mobility, we're going Movement Speed, but you can use ranks to Digigrade Gate, and then we're getting our second Hurricane Duration tempering here. Now, the reason why we're running a second Resistance to all elements tempering on our boots is because we're going to be using occult gems this season, and occult gems only have up to 8% resistance to all elements, as where when you have a fully maxed out diamond, those go up to 12%. So we're going to need to supplement our resistance to all elements a little bit more. Moving on to our weapon, we're using a two-hand mace for the overpower damage. Then we're grabbing up willpower, max life, overpower damage, an offensive earth critical strike chance tempering, as well as a weapon tempering for chance for boulder projectiles to cast twice. For the Dome and Stone Amulet, we're going to focus on Nature Magic cooldown reduction. Now, some people like to put all 3 Masterwork crits into the cooldown reduction. I personally don't mind if I get 1 crit into Wrath skills. Then on our first ring, we're going to be running Max Life, Critical Strike Chance, Overpower, Earth Critical Strike Chance, and then we're going to be using the Resource Tempering, Casting Wrath skills restores primary resources. And this is the big tempering that allows me to basically spam my border without any issues regarding resource management. And I always recommend that if you are running 1 ring, that you go ahead and try to get 2 Masterwork crits into that affix if you can, because it really makes a big difference when you decide to swap into a Hunter Zenith ring with this build. Then onto our Hunter Zenith ring, we're going to be looking for that GA2 ranks to quick shift to build up our damage, and we're going to look to get as many Masterwork crits into that as possible. Now moving on to our Runewords, on one of our armor pieces, we're going to be running Tam and Zal to get that nice 20% increase to our max life. And then on our second Runeword, which is going to be on our weapon, we're going to be running Igni as well as Yom, which is going to allow us to constantly have Petrify going off while we're using this build, which is not only going to give us a bit of a damage increase because we're going to have that buff up all the time, but it's also going to help with resource management. Now, something I did want to go ahead and mention that I have written here in the text box is that if you are trying to push very high tier pits, you're going to have to swap out your Yom rune with the Quas rune. And the Quas rune gives you that big double damage proc on a skill. And what you're going to try to do is line up your Hunter Zenith ring buff with your Quas rune proc to get a massive overpower crit double damage border flying around in your Hurricane. Now, the reason why I say this is only for high tier pits is because this is going to take you a lot of practice to actually get used to and can actually be quite annoying. So I would always recommend that if you're just farming with this build and you don't really care for pushing into super high tier pits, then just focus on this version of the build. However, if you are looking to really push this build to its maximum damage potential, you're going to have to practice and you're going to have to get good at snapshotting this double damage into an overpower crit from your Hunter Zenith ring. Now moving on to our witch powers, and again, like I said, I did swap some of these around. However, you guys should use whatever you want with your witch powers. This is just what I personally like to use, and I find the most enjoyable. And I think this is a great part of the build where you can be as flexible as you want and create as many cool things as you can while you're playing through Season 7. So for our unique power, I decided to go with the Cycle. Then we're picking up Aura of Siphoning for the poisoning as well as the HP generation. Then we're going to be using the Aura of Specialization, which gives us a little bit of crit damage, as well as increases the size of our aura. Then we're going to be using the Hex of Shattering, which is a super easy hex to apply to enemies, and it gives a lot of damage reduction. After that, we're going to be slotting in the Force of Will, which increases the damage of our overpowers. And then last but not least, we're going to be using Soul Harvest, which gives us a massive buff to our primary stat. On our gems, we're going to be slotting in Sapphires on the leftover armor pieces. And then for our jewelry pieces, we're going to be running Fiend of the Bog to increase our primary stat as well as our max life. For our second gem, we're going to be using Phantom Sting, which gives us more overpower damage. And then for our third and final gem, that's Elder Sigil, which increases the damage of our Wrath skills. Moving on to the skill tree, we're going Claw into Enhanced Claw. Then on our core skill tree, we're going 1 point Heart of the Wild into 3 points Wild Impulses, following up with 1 point Predatory Instinct into 3 points Iron Fur. Moving down to our defensive skill tree, going 1 point Earthen Bulwark into Enhanced Earthen Bulwark for the Unstoppable. Then we're grabbing 3 points Backlash to increase our damage after we use a defensive skill. And then 1 point into Ancestral Fortitude, just to give us a little bit more elemental resistance. And then we're going 1 point into Bloodhowl into Preserving Bloodhowl. On the companion skill tree, we're just going to be picking up 3 points into Feral Aptitude. For our Wrath skill tree, we're going 1 point Hurricane into Savage Hurricane for the damage reduction. Then we're going 5 points Boulder into Natural Boulder for the increased critical strike chance when we have our Fortify up. Then we're going to be picking up 3 points Crushing Earth as well as 3 points Stone Guard. And from there, we're going to go 3 points Mending into 3 points Provocation. Next, we're going to be picking up 1 point Neurotoxin into 3 points Envenom. After that, it's on to our ultimate skill tree where we pick up 1 point into Petrify, followed up into Supreme Petrify. Then we're going 3 points Defiance into 3 points Natural Disaster. Now, because we are going to be directly casting Petrify so often, we are going to invest 3 points into Catastrophe to get that nice damage buff after we've cast our ultimate skill. After that, we're going to be picking up 1 point defensive posture into 3 points unrestrained. And I really like this passive because Earthen Bulwark is not up all the time, and I really like the reduced duration of crowd control effects here. However, this is just a preference, and if you guys want, you can take these 4 skill points and move them anywhere else on the board that you would prefer. After that, we're going to be picking up 3 points quick shift into 3 points height and senses. And then for our key passive, it's going to be Earth Sign Strength. Now moving on to our Paragon board, and like I said earlier, for the initial build, I did go ahead and reduce the number of Paragon points on the board so you guys had a better idea as to how to path. But for the Mythic version, all of the Paragon points are there. So just going to go over the initial version so that way you guys can have a better understanding as to what's going on while I'm playing on stream. So for the starter board, we are going to be slotting in Headhunter here and picking up enough points into Willpower to unlock the additional bonuses. Then we're going to move into the Earth and Devastation board. We are going to pick up the Legendary Node as soon as possible. And then we're going to be slotting in the Outmatch Glyph and unlocking those additional bonuses as well. For the third board, that's going to be the Survival Instincts board, and we're picking up Survival Instincts again as soon as possible. And then slotting in Earth and Sky here, mainly because of these nice max life nodes that we have on this board. Then on to the fourth board, that's going to be the Height and Malice board. We're going to be slotting in the Spirit Glyph here, and again, we're going to prioritize picking up the Legendary Node Height and Malice to increase our damage. Then for the fifth and final board, that's going to be the Ancestral Guidance board. Again, guys, we're going to be picking up the Legendary Node here to increase our damage and slotting in the Dominate Glyph because it's really easy to unlock the additional bonuses. And there are quite a few Intelligence nodes to pick up so you can jack up the amount of additive overpower damage you add to your build. Then for the last section of the build, we're going to be talking about the Mercenary. And again, guys, use whatever Mercenary you prefer. I personally like Subo in softcore and Rahir in hardcore. I like Subo here because he identifies everything on the map from enemies to resources. And then in hardcore, obviously Rahir can save your life if you find yourself in a compromising position. So for this version, we're just going to highlight the Subo variant. And I like to go into Molotov as well as spare a drink for a few extra healing potions every now and again. And then from there, we're going to path down to Explosive Charge, followed up with the Bargaining Chips passive to give us a little bit more overpower damage towards targets that have been hit by the Explosive Charged arrows. Then on our reinforcement, I like to run Rahir with Bastion, just because when you're standing inside of Bastion, you basically cannot die. Now, if you are running this build in hardcore, this is the Mercenary setup that I personally like. So I like to move down to Ground Slam into Rahir's Aegis for the elemental resist. Then I pick up Bastion, and then I grab up the Inspiration passive, which gives us a massive damage increase while we're standing inside of Bastion. And then for our reinforcement Mercenary, I like to go Bouldercane and Field of Languish. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it for the video. That is my Bouldercane bear build here for Season 7. Now, if I do make any changes to the build going further, I have added a change log to the build planner, and all of those changes will be added into the change log, so you guys will have easy access to that information. And now that I have finished this build, I'm going to be moving on to the abomination that is the Cataclysm build, which of course is the highest damage build for the Druid this season. However, I would say that even though Cataclysm is our S tier build for Druid this season, Bouldercane is certainly the S tier of fun for Druid this season. But anyways, guys, let me know what you think down in the comments section. And if you guys have any questions whatsoever, feel free to post them down there and I will answer them as soon as I see them. Also, if you see me streaming, feel free to stop by there and ask any questions whatsoever regarding any of the builds that I've made this season. But as always, guys, I hope you're having a great day or a great night, depending on wherever you're from, and peace out. I will see you in the next one.